Hey there, DIY enthusiasts! Are you ready to take your home decor game to the next level? Then let's talk about DIY furniture projects. Not only do they give you a sense of satisfaction when you create something from scratch, but they can also save you a ton of money compared to buying furniture from a store. Plus, it's a great way to get into woodworking if you're new to it. One of the most exciting and practical DIY furniture projects out there is building a side-drop leaf dining table. You might be thinking, but wait, what's so special about that? Well, how about adding a twist to it, making it a round table by simply folding the sides down with a hook? Now, that's what I call innovative. I remember the first time I attempted to build a DIY dining table. It was a disaster. I had a hard time following the instructions, my cuts were crooked, and the stain was all over the place. But you know what they say, practice makes perfect. After a few attempts and lots of trial and error, I finally got the hang of it. The end result? A beautiful and unique piece that I am incredibly proud of. Now, let's get back to our drop leaf dining table. Imagine hosting a dinner party and everyone gathered around your magnificent creation. The sides can be folded down for a more intimate setting, or you can keep them up for a larger table. And the best part is that you don't need a huge space to store it when it's not in use. Trust me when I say that building your own furniture is worth it. It's not just about the end product, but it's about the journey as well. You get to challenge yourself, learn new skills, and have fun while doing it. Plus, it's a great way to impress your friends and family with your DIY skills. This is such a game changer for anyone who wants to maximize their space in a small apartment or home. Plus, it adds a touch of elegance to any room. I actually have a personal story about a similar table that I built for my own apartment. Before I built it, I was struggling to fit a regular rectangular table in my small kitchen, which made it hard to entertain guests. But once I built my own round table with sides that folded down, it was a game changer. Suddenly, I had more space in my kitchen, and my guests were impressed by the unique design of my table. Plus, it was a great conversation starter. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. You'll need some basic woodworking skills to build a table like this, but don't worry, it's easier than you might think. I mean, if I can do it, anyone can. With the right tools and materials, you can build a round table with sides that fold down in no time. And trust me, the sense of accomplishment you'll feel when you're done is unbeatable. So, are you ready to take on this woodworking project and create your own stunning piece of furniture? Let me know in the comments if you've ever built your own furniture before and what your experience was like. And if you haven't, don't worry, I'll be right here with you every step of the way. Today we're going to talk about how to build a round table with sides that fold down. I know what you're thinking, oh boy, building furniture sounds like a real headache. But let me tell you, with the right tools and a little bit of patience, it's not as daunting as it seems. First things first, let's talk about the materials you're going to need. You'll need some 3/4 inch plywood, a jigsaw or circular saw, a drill with a 3/8 inch bit, some wood glue, a pocket hole jig, 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws, 2-inch corner braces with screws, 3/4 inch wooden dowels, sandpaper, and some stain or paint of your choice. Now, I'm not exactly Bob the Builder, but I have built a few pieces of furniture in my day. I remember one time I tried to build a bookshelf and ended up with a pile of wood scraps that looked like a Jenga tower. But let's not talk about that, let's focus on this round table. To begin, we'll need to gather some materials. You'll need some 3/4 inch plywood, a jigsaw or circular saw, a measuring tape, and some clamps to hold your wood in place. And if you're like me, you'll also need some coffee and maybe some tunes to get you pumped up and ready to go. First, let's focus on cutting the tabletop. The tabletop should be a circle with a diameter of your choice. The size of your tabletop will depend on what you plan on using the table for, a small side table or a large dining table. The choice is yours. Personally, I remember building a small side table for my living room and thought it would be a great idea to make the top as big as possible. Big mistake. My living room turned into a maze of furniture, and I had to zigzag my way through just to get to the other side. Lesson learned: measure twice, cut once. Now, let's get back to cutting that tabletop. Use your measuring tape to measure out the diameter and mark it on the plywood. Then, clamp the wood securely to your work surface and use your jigsaw or circular saw to carefully cut out the circle. And just like that, you have a perfectly round tabletop. Next, we'll need to cut the leg pieces. The legs should be 2½ inches wide and 28 inches long. Cut 4 of these leg pieces. I remember one time I tried to cut some legs for a coffee table and ended up with one leg shorter than the rest. Let's just say that coffee table was great for playing beer pong, but not so much for placing your coffee cup on. So, make sure to measure out the length and width of your leg pieces and mark them on the plywood. Then, clamp the wood securely and use your jigsaw or circular saw to cut out the leg pieces. And voila! You now have your 4 leg pieces ready to go. And there you have it, folks. Step 1. Cutting the tabletop and leg pieces. Now that we have our pieces cut out, it's time to move on to step 2. For this step, you'll need a pocket hole jig, your drill, and some 1¼ inch pocket hole screws. Pocket holes are a great way to attach pieces of wood together, especially if you don't want to use visible screws or nails. Now, let me tell you a little story about my experience with pocket holes. One time, I was trying to build a bookshelf and thought I could just eyeball where to drill the holes. Let's just say, it didn't go as planned. My bookshelf was more crooked than the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So, let's learn from my mistake and use a pocket hole jig to drill our holes correctly. To start, place your leg piece in the pocket hole jig and adjust the depth collar on your drill bit to match the thickness of your wood. Then, drill 2 pocket holes at each end of the legs, one on the top and one on the inside face. Make sure to double-check the placement of the holes to ensure that they line up with the tabletop. Now, if you're like me, you might be wondering what to do if you accidentally drill your pocket holes in the wrong spot. Well, let me tell you, it's not the end of the world. You can use wood filler to patch up the hole and try again. Just make sure to let the wood filler dry completely before drilling your new pocket hole. And there you have it, folks. Step 2. Drilling pocket holes and legs. With our pocket holes drilled, we're one step closer to having our beautiful and functional table complete. Stay tuned for step 3. For this step, you'll need wood glue, some 1¼ inch pocket hole screws, and those beautiful legs you just drilled your pocket holes into. As always, remember to be careful when handling your tools and materials. First things first, let's talk about wood glue. Have you ever tried to glue 2 pieces of wood together without clamps and had the wood slide around on you? I have, and let me tell you, it's not a pretty sight. So, make sure to use some clamps to hold your legs in place while the glue dries. To attach the legs to the tabletop, apply a bead of wood glue to the top of each leg and position them on the underside of the tabletop. Then, using the pocket holes you drilled in the previous step, screw the legs in place. Make sure to screw the legs in securely and check that they are level before the glue sets. Now, here's a little trick I like to use when attaching legs to a tabletop. Before attaching the legs, I like to put the tabletop upside down and put a mark at the center point of the tabletop. Then, I do the same for the leg pieces. This way, I know I'm attaching the legs in the right position and the table will be evenly balanced. And voila! You've completed step 3, attach legs to tabletop. Take a step back and admire your work. You're building a beautiful and functional piece of furniture for your home. Stay tuned for step 4, cut the drop leaf pieces. In the meantime, let's do a little happy dance to celebrate our progress. Who's with me? For this step, you'll need your trusty 3/4 inch plywood and a jigsaw or circular saw to cut 2 drop leaf pieces. The drop leaf pieces should be the same width as the tabletop and 12 inches deep. Now, here's a little personal story. I remember the first time I tried to cut a circle with a jigsaw, and let's just say it didn't go as planned. My hand was shaking, the saw was all over the place, and the circle looked like a square. But, with practice, I got better and now I can cut circles like a pro. So, If this is your first time using a jigsaw, don't worry if it doesn't turn out perfect. The important thing is to keep practicing and keep improving. When cutting the drop leaf pieces, take your time and make sure you're cutting straight. You can use a straight edge or a piece of scrap wood to guide your saw and make sure you're cutting a straight line. And always remember to wear your safety glasses and ear protection to protect your eyes and ears. Once you've cut your drop leaf pieces, give them a quick sanding to smooth out any rough edges. Then, it's time to move on to the next step. Alrighty, step 5, it's time to attach the hinges. This is where things start to get really interesting because we're bringing everything together. You're going to need some hinges, obviously, so go ahead and grab those. Now, here's a pro tip for you: make sure you get the right size hinges for your project. You don't want to end up with hinges that are too small or too big, because that's just going to cause problems down the line. Assuming you've got the right size hinges, it's time to get cracking. First, you're going to attach the hinges to the drop leaf pieces. But wait, what are the drop leaf pieces, you ask? Well, they're the bits that will fold down when you're not using the table. Now, I've got a personal example for you. My sister once made a drop leaf table for her apartment, and it was a game changer. She could fold it down when she needed more space, and it just made the whole room feel so much bigger. Plus, it was a great conversation starter. Oh, what's that? A drop leaf table? How cool! Anyway, back to the hinges. You're going to want to place them on the inside of the legs so that they'll be hidden when the table is in use. This is important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it just looks neater and more professional. And secondly, you don't want anyone catching their clothes on the hinges when they're sitting at the table. That would be a disaster. Once you've got the hinges in the right position, it's time to use screws to attach them to the drop leaf pieces and legs. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been particularly good at using a screwdriver. It always seems to slip, or the screw ends up going in wonky. But hey, practice makes perfect, right? One thing to keep in mind here is that you want to make sure the hinges are securely attached. You don't want them coming loose after a few uses, because that's just going to be a pain to fix. So take your time, make sure the screws are tight, and don't be afraid to double check everything. All in all, attaching the hinges is a pretty straightforward step, but it's an important one. You're starting to see the table really take shape now, and it's exciting. Just think, before long you'll have a beautiful, functional piece of furniture that you made with your own 2 hands. And if anyone asks, you can proudly tell them, yeah, I built that. It's time to add some hooks to the underside of the drop leaf pieces. You might be thinking, what's the deal with hooks? I thought we were building a table, not a coat rack. But hear me out, these hooks are actually a key part of the table's design. So, let's get started. You're going to need some hooks, obviously. They're not too hard to find, but just make sure you get ones that are the right size and shape for your table. Now, why do we need hooks, you ask? Well, the hooks are going to latch onto the legs when the drop leaf pieces are raised. This is important because it will keep the table stable and prevent it from wobbling around when you're using it. I've got a personal example for you here. My friend once built a drop leaf table for his kitchen, and he didn't put any hooks on it. Every time he tried to use the table, it would wobble around like crazy, and he was constantly afraid it was going to collapse. Needless to say, it wasn't a great experience. So, let's avoid that disaster by attaching some hooks, shall we? You're going to want to position the hooks on the underside of the drop leaf pieces so that they'll latch onto the legs when the table is in use. This might take a little bit of trial and error to get right, so don't be afraid to adjust the position of the hooks until they are in the perfect spot. Once you've got the hooks where you want them, it's time to use screws to attach them to the drop leaf pieces. Now, I know what you're thinking, not the screws again. But trust me, you'll get the hang of it. One thing to keep in mind here is that you want to make sure the hooks are securely attached. You don't want them coming loose and ruining all your hard work. And, just like with the hinges, you want to make sure the screws are tight and everything is double-checked. All in all, adding hooks might seem like a small step, but it's an important one. It's going to make your table much more stable and enjoyable to use, and that's what it's all about. Plus, if you ever need to hang something up while you're using the table, you've got some handy hooks right there. So go ahead and attach those hooks, and before you know it, you'll have a beautiful, functional table that you built with your own two hands. And who knows, maybe you'll even start to get a reputation as a DIY master. Oh, you need a table? Yeah, I can build you one of those. We're going to drill some holes for the wooden dowels that will hold the drop leaf pieces in place when they're down. Now, you might be thinking, dowels? What are those? Well, let me tell you, the dowels are these little wooden pegs that we're going to use to keep the drop leaf pieces from flopping around when they're in the down position. They're like the glue that holds everything together, so to speak. So, let's get started. You're going to need a drill for this step, obviously. And some wooden dowels, of course. Make sure the dowels are the right size for your table. You don't want to be stuck with some mismatched dowels. Once you've got your tools and materials, it's time to drill some holes. You're going to want to drill 2 holes in each leg, spaced about 1 inch apart and 1.5 inches from the top of the leg. This is where the dowels are going to go, so make sure you get the spacing just right. Now, I have a personal example to share with you guys here. One time, I was building a table for my sister, and I accidentally drilled the holes in the wrong place. Long story short, the table ended up looking like a leaning tower of Pisa, not exactly what I was going for. So, learn from my mistake and make sure you measure everything out before you start drilling. Once you've got the holes drilled, it's time to insert the dowels. This part is pretty straightforward. Just make sure the dowels fit snugly in the holes and that they're not sticking out too much. Now, the dowels are going to play a crucial role in keeping your table sturdy and functional. They're what's going to keep the drop leaf pieces in place, so you want to make sure they're secure. One final note, you might want to consider adding a bit of glue to the dowels to make them extra secure. It's not strictly necessary, but it can't hurt. We're making some serious progress on our drop leaf table project, and now it's time for step 8, inserting those wooden dowels we drilled holes for in step 7. So, you've got your dowels ready to go, and you've drilled the holes in the legs. Now it's time to insert the dowels into those holes. You want to make sure the dowels fit snugly into the holes, not too tight, not too loose. If they're too loose, the drop leaf pieces won't be held securely in place, and that would be a major bummer. Speaking of bummers, let me tell you about a mistake I made when I first started woodworking. I was making a coffee table for my mom, and I didn't measure the dowels correctly. Long story short, the dowels were too short, and the table was wobbly and unstable. Needless to say, my mom was not impressed. So, make sure you measure your dowels carefully, people. Okay, back to the task at hand. You want to make sure the dowels are long enough to extend through the drop leaf pieces. This is important because it's what's going to keep everything together and prevent the drop leaf pieces from flopping around. If the dowels don't extend through the drop leaf pieces, you're going to have a bad time. When you're inserting the dowels, you can use a mallet or a hammer to gently tap them into place. You don't want to use too much force, though you don't want to split the wood or damage the dowels. Just a little tap 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 should do the trick. And that's it. The dowels are in place, and your table is starting to come together. It's amazing how such a simple thing like a wooden dowel can make such a big difference in the stability and functionality of your table. Now, if you're feeling really ambitious, you can even paint or stain your dowels to match the rest of the table. This is totally optional, but it can add a nice finishing touch. So, there you have it, step 8 is done and dusted. We're getting so close to having a fully functional drop leaf table, and I can't wait to see how yours turns out. We've made it to step 9, the final stretch. We're going to be sanding and staining, or painting, our drop leaf table to give it that beautiful finished look. First things first, sanding. You want to make sure you sand the entire table and drop leaf pieces to smooth out any rough edges or imperfections. Nobody likes splinters in their furniture, am I right? Trust me, you'll appreciate the extra effort when you're enjoying a nice meal on your new table without any pesky rough spots. Now, let me tell you a little story about the importance of sanding. One time, I built a bookshelf and thought I could get away with not sanding it because it looked pretty smooth. Well, fast forward to a few days later, and I had a bunch of scratched up books and knickknacks because there were little rough spots on the shelf. Lesson learned: always sand. Once you've sanded the table and dropped leaf pieces, it's time to apply the stain or paint of your choice. This is where you can really let your creative juices flow. Do you want a natural wood look? Go for a clear stain. Want a pop of color? Paint it up. The possibilities are endless. Now, a word of caution: make sure you follow the manufacturer's instructions for the stain or paint you're using. Different products have different application methods and drying times, and you don't want to end up with a sticky, tacky mess. That's not a good look for anyone. Personally, I love using a clear stain on my woodworking projects because it really brings out the natural beauty of the wood. It's like adding a little extra shine to your hard work. But hey, that's just my preference, you do you. And that's it, we've sanded and stained, or painted, our drop leaf table, and it's looking like a real masterpiece. You can be proud of yourself for all the hard work you've put in, and you'll have a gorgeous piece of furniture to show for it. So, there you have it, step 9 is in the books. All that's left is to step back and admire your handiwork. Great job! Let's tackle some frequently asked questions about building a round table with sides that fold down. First up, how long does it take to build a round table with sides that fold down? Well, that really depends on your level of experience and the complexity of the design. If you're a seasoned woodworker and have a simple design in mind, you might be able to knock it out in a day. But for those of us who are just starting out, it might take a weekend or even a few weekends to complete the project. Don't rush the process, take your time and enjoy the journey. Next up, what tools do I need to build a round table with sides that fold down? You'll need basic woodworking tools such as a saw, drill, screws, and sandpaper. And let's not forget about safety. It's important to use gloves, goggles, and a dust mask to protect yourself while you work. Safety first, my friends. Now, for the final question, can a round table with sides that fold down be used as an outdoor table? It's definitely possible, but you need to choose the right materials and finishes to make sure it can withstand the elements. Outdoor-grade plywood is a good choice, and finishes that protect against water and sun damage are a must. And let's be real, nobody wants to host a barbecue and have their table fall apart mid-burger flip. Trust me, I've been there. At the end of the day, building a round table with sides that fold down is a fun and rewarding project. It's a great way to hone your woodworking skills and create a piece of furniture that's both functional and beautiful. Just remember to take your time, use the right tools and materials, and don't forget to have a little fun along the way. So, that's it for our FAQs. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And as always, happy building, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to build a round table with sides that fold down. If you found it helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future woodworking videos. And hey, if you're looking for more woodworking plans, don't forget to check out the link in the video description. You can access 16,000 plans instantly for any project you have in mind. That's right, 16,000 plans, you'll never run out of inspiration. So, what are you waiting for? Click that link and let's get building. And remember, safety first, because we all know that woodworking and accident-prone go hand in hand. Thanks for watching and happy woodworking.